I want to welcome you all. My name is Alan Kearns. I want to welcome you to today's webinar, and it's part of our series with the Human Resource Professional Association, Ontario, on this whole concept of really launching your career, and as we're calling this our CareerClass series, part of our CareerClass series, and helping you to be more effective as an HR professional. And in CareerJoy, we're really pleased to be partnering with your association to help you think about lifelong learning and how to do the things that for yourself that you help your clients do. So we'll be starting in a minute or so, but I want to welcome you. My name is Alan Kearns, and I'm going to be leading today's webinar. So welcome you. We'll get started in a minute. All right, well, we'll get started right away. We're right on the button at 12, and we promised to start at 12, so if I can make the commitment. I want to welcome you to today's webinar. My name is Alan Kearns, and as I said, we're pleased to be partnering with the HR Professional Association of Ontario to be helping think about your career, and in this series to help HR professionals themselves to think about your career and think about how you go about practicing what we all preach to our clients and to what we've learned and elements on this. So I'm going to be sharing with you some of my perspective of some of the best practices and ideas that can help you to really launch your career and have career success for the long haul. And I'm going to be sharing with you some really, hopefully you'll find very practical tips to guide you and think about your career and career management in general and how to manage your career more effectively. A couple of quick things as we get started. First of all, from a housekeeping perspective, since we have muted everyone, we do that on purpose. Otherwise, what we end up is with a large turnout like we have today, we end up with a lot of background noise. And so, a couple of different ways to participate in today. Well, there's sort of external ways and there's internal ways. So, start with the external ways. How many of you are on Twitter or tweet at all? Put up your hands, those of you that use Twitter or tweet at all. Okay, good. A number of you do. Excellent. All right. Well, feel free today to share any ideas or thoughts to your network, and part of what you want to be thinking about in really nurturing and building your own brand is, are you helping others to achieve their own career success and nurturing those elements? And so part of the way you can do that, Twitter is a great way to do that. Some of the tools that are out there, the technology tools. So feel free to hashtag either #CareerJoy or #CareerClass. And also a presentation that we'll have an opportunity at the 45-minute section or so to do a Q&A. And then how many of you are on LinkedIn? Put up your hands, those of you that are on LinkedIn that are part of LinkedIn. Okay. Yeah, LinkedIn is obviously another terrific tool. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that today, but we'll talk a bit about that as part of this process. But also feel free to connect with me. I've got over 5,300 connections across the country in different segments and in different areas. And so one of the things, your network is your net worth. And so a great way to stay connected is through LinkedIn and the tools that they provide. And a great way to do that is to think about this. And some questions come in. Do you need audio? No, you won't need audio. Another quick way to participate in today is you'll notice that you have a hands up. So I just want to give me a hands up to make sure that that you can see my screen properly, just to make sure. Okay, great, excellent. And obviously the voice as well, because you wouldn't be able to see my response to my hearing. The other thing I'm going to ask you just to take a minute to introduce yourself and where you're calling from today. So introduce yourself and where you're joining our webinar from today. Just in the question box there, just give us a sense of where you're coming from. And this is totally confidential, so I'm the only one who can see this as well. So that'll give me a sense of where you're calling from and your background and a little bit about your background. Okay, great, excellent. We're going to sort of see how far we get across the province today. North York, Niagara. Oh, we got somebody from Michelle. I think we got New York, Mississauga, North York rather, Richmond Hill, Manitoba. Okay, we're going to Manitoba. London, terrific. Ajax, Barrie, Oakville, great, excellent. So we're getting a good cross-reference of people right across the province here, and some even outside of our province. Okay, great. And also feel free to follow me on Twitter or Also, I've given you my contact information here if you have any specific questions or comments that you wanted to ask me directly, then I've given you my contact information here, so feel free to do that. I'm also going to send you out my LinkedIn profile, and that way, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll give you my email as well, because you'll need that, then feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Great. All right. So we'll get rolling here. As I mentioned, my name is Alan Kearns, and I'm the founder and head coach of Career Joy. And my own story is very interesting. My parents, my mom actually was manager of HR for a trucking company, CP Transport, which eventually got acquired. And so I grew up in a house where actually I'm quite familiar with with HR. Literally, as a young child, I sort of was surrounded by this whole topic of people and human resources and elements around this. So I was sort of very familiar with that. But I actually went to school to become an optician, and I followed my dad's footsteps and recognized that through a series of events, I ended up was past to take over my dad's practice, and recognized that's not really what I wanted to do, and ended up actually in the recruiting industry and ended up doing recruitment for a number of years. And one of the things I discovered is a couple things in my own journey is I realized, one, how few people really understood how the sort of the game worked of how to land and manage your career, and you've probably seen that in the kind of work you do. But also the reality of change and dealing with change. And so the company I founded, Career Joy, is now we're in our 10th year, and we work with organizations, a number of organizations across the country. They engage us to work with their team on restructuring, on leadership development, on career change, on paternity and maternity kinds of changes, as well as individuals. So I come at this perspective having and running a company that's heavily involved on a day-to-day basis with people and change. And really, our focus of our company is seeing the human and human resources, and that's really the key. And sort of one of the things about our own experience as HR professionals is sometimes we ourselves teaching what we teach sometimes don't always see things correctly, or sometimes we, make mistakes ourselves. So I'm hoping today that I'll help you think about these things, and hoping that you won't sort of end up like this slide is after the archery lesson with, the kinds of things you're thinking about. So you're probably here because you're thinking about, obviously, as you're launching your career relatively early in your career, that you will, oh, you're not seeing my screen. I'd ask people if they were seeing my screen. Okay, now, can you ever see my screen now? Got to ask people to give me hands up if you can see my screen. I thought, okay, all right, well, that's a bit of a problem. So as sort of you think about this whole concept of the questions you may have around your career and some of the elements around how to manage your career and what this looks like, this is sort of my experience, both in working with organizations and individuals, is thinking about, how do you manage your career, and how do you, not make the kind of mistakes that you're teaching others around. And to me, one of the real key things to be thinking about is, as you're managing your career, is what is your career literacy? Why does it matter? Well, I'm going to be sharing with you some of the reasons it matters and some statistics around specifically the HR professional, why literacy matters. And I don't know, how many of you are familiar with the work of Terry O'Reilly, or follow him or listen to him speak, some of the stuff that he's done? A number of you are. And what's interesting about what he shares is this concept of literacy, that his goal is to raise the literacy rate of individuals like you and I to understand how marketing influences us. And my question for you is, what is your own personal career literacy? What is your literacy rate? How would you describe your literacy? Now, a lot of you went to school and obviously are certification as a certified individual, and often are thinking about these things. So your literacy would be higher than sort of average, but still surprisingly, you have to be thinking about, how do you build upon this? How do you build upon what you already have and see what you know and understand from a literate perspective? Now, why is this important? Well, there's a number of different changes that are going on in the world of work, and they impact all of us. And specifically in HR, you're seeing this. So there's this whole concept of what's going on in the financial markets. There's an incredible amount of turbulence in financial markets. You're seeing what happens in Cyprus, impacts California as an example. Just seeing Cyprus yesterday and all the things that are going on. And so the global integration of our economy. So that's a change from 10 years ago when we were more asynchronous, and now we're much more synchronized. You're seeing this in public sector. So we do a lot of work in public sector, but then you're seeing there's just a tremendous amount of change going on in public sectors, and there's more to happen in it, specifically in Ontario. The Ontario public sector is just about to head into a radical amount of transition, and they haven't really even started yet. So public sector are going through radical transition. Globalization, you're seeing this in specifically where globalization is impacting, and you're seeing the opportunity for companies to do work anywhere, anytime, and where you as HR professionals, are managing maybe virtual teams or have teams around the world. How many of you work for organizations? Put up your hands where you have part of your workforce offshore somewhere. Put up your hands. Those of you that are involved or overseeing some sort of global workforce. Yeah, and that's again changing. I was chatting with a new client we have, and she was just sharing that to me how they're shutting out part of their team and moving it offshore. So that's a change. The role of technology, the fact that technology is being moved around, and the fact that we are interconnected on an ongoing basis, and this creates both challenges with where are the electronic boundaries at work. Even companies that are having policies around YouTube and Facebook and all these sorts of things, which, by the way, I look at YouTube and Facebook from a corporate perspective as the new smoke break that people have, shutting those things down aren't necessarily going to help, but I also understand why some companies do that. And also the reality of a 24 by nature sort of scenario of what's going on in the world. Same thing with the use of contract. How many of you are currently on contract or have been on contract in your career? Put up your hands, those of you that are currently on contract or have been on contract. Yeah, a large percentage, right, of you are using. So again, a change where this whole concept of long-term, lifetime employment is changing, and again, you're seeing that even with an organization like Head to Head, which provides HR professionals on a contract basis. The same thing with the merging of new technology and displacing old technology. Same thing with retirement. It's very interesting, the retirement study here by the Globe and Mail, that in 2009, 55% of individuals just saw themselves retiring at the age of 66, and in 2012, that number had dropped by half to 27%, meaning that 83% of people or 73% of people rather, that's why I'm not an accountant, saw themselves as working at the ages of 66. And the reason they saw themselves working were 25% enjoyed their work, and 21% wanted to be mentally active, and 16% it was an economic reason. So it's very interesting how we're seeing ourselves staying in the world of work longer. Same thing with the amount of choices that are out there. So you have all kinds of choices. I call this the mustard principle, that whether it's choosing mustard, but also whether you're doing an MBA or going back and doing masters, or all the certification levels, all the courses you can take as HR professionals. What are the right ones? What are the ones that are of value? What are all the choices that are out there? And that's impacting scenario. So what does this mean? Well, let me sort of share with you some of the stats as it relates to your profession as HR professionals. So there's all kinds of changes going on in the world of work. And therefore, this is a study by KPMG on the future of HR. And it says 81% of respondents saw that talent management was a key competitive advantage in dealing with change. So organizations understood that talent management, HR, was a really important element. But here's the crux of the matter of your profession or my profession. Only 15% of senior executives saw HR as able to provide meaningful, insightful, and predictable work for analysts. They saw a high need for value, but we're seeing a low value proposition from HR. And just 17% saw HR as able to demonstrate value in business. So this is interesting to think about. Here's the quandary about launching your career, or managing your career in an environment where there's a tremendous amount of change going on concurrently, while your profession is somewhat struggling at the executive level with seeing its value. So that's an important thing that some of these principles I want to share with you, because not only can it help yourself in your own career, but I think the ability for you to raise the value, raise the visibility, raise the impact you can have at the executive table. And I would ask you, which Fortune 500 CEO in Canada or Fortune 100 CEO came as the director or the chief human resources officer? Can you name one CEO who came out of the most senior role out of HR? They're very, very rare. Now, why is that? That's a question. When you think about the greatest need of a company is to effectively manage people, why is it that HR and the career of HR and the value of HR, the profession of HR is struggling with that? And that's just something we have to be thinking about, all of us. And so if you can think about these elements as it relates to you, then it's going to help not only your career, but also your profession, which I think is fundamentally in a process of change. Here's another thing to think about, that only 28% of HR leaders have been in the company for many years, for 10 plus years. So this concept of the idea that that you're going to stay in your company over a long-term period and you're going to get the most senior role. Here's the other stat around it, that only 40% of the top HR role, or 40% of the top HR role rather, was hired from the outside. So a lot of positions are being hired externally. So again, another reason why you want to be thinking about your own career, managing your career, getting lots of experience. Now, speaking of experience, another stat around this from the Wharton study, so that there's a 300% increase in international experience at the most senior level. So one of the things we're thinking about, which goes back to some of the globalization, are you getting international experience? That's why I asked the question, are you managing an international team? Are you on international assignments? Can you get access to international assignments? Can you go on an expat assignment? If you can do that, that's going to give you a tremendous advantage long-term, especially as globalization truly integrates into our workforce. Another interesting thing is that there's been a substantive increase in female leadership as the most senior role in HR. So again, that's a really positive thing. It's gone to almost half of the most senior leaders in HR organizations are female. So again, a change in that, which I think is really, really great. There's another sort of stat around this. What do they see as the value of the HR? And sort of the greatest, the value proposition that people think about in HR in general is managing costs is number one, collaboration with senior management or our people strategy, and implementing coaching and career development programs. So sort of and then followed by retaining talent globally. So again, if you think about this, is what the organization's drivers are. Number one, managing costs. Number two, collaborating with senior management on people strategy. Number 3 and 4, sort of talent engagement, retaining and engaging talent, and operational excellence. So here's the reality: is if this is what the demand is, then how do you align your skills and manage your career while paying attention to this? See, one of the kind of the tensions that HR professionals, people in HR, are often drawn to it to help people, to guide people, to make a difference with people, which is fantastic. But you also have to be thinking about the business reality of your career, and the business reality of managing your career, the business reality of dealing with change and your ability to add value, and align your strengths, align the kinds of things you're doing, align the projects you choose, align the areas you pursue around the organizational needs. And that's really key, is that in a sense our career needs to be about us, but it also needs to be around the organization. So all of these things are creating what I call, an industrial storm. And what's great about industrial storms, we're currently having a storm today in Toronto and in Ottawa, and you're just saying it creates opportunity. Now, some of the challenges around industrial storms is you're seeing more and more health issues, more and more disability claims, more of these kinds of things. So again, you're not only seeing this in scenarios, but you're seeing this at work. So the question becomes, are you going to be afraid of this, or are you going to be smart about this? And so what is the smart way to think about as you're launching your career and managing your career on an ongoing basis? Because the sooner you apply these principles to yourself, the more likely that you're going to be able to reach your potential. And here's the reality that you and I know, that it's not the smartest person in the room. It's the person who is the smartest about how they go, their whole skills in managing your career, managing your brand, being political, and all these types of things. Some of the myths around this is, around career management in general is you should know how to do this. And I call it scuba diving myth. None of you would expect yourselves to know how to scuba dive. You would go to get some scuba diving literacy, right? Another myth around this is there's a magic bullet. How many of you have taken a Myers-Briggs, or what color have you? Put up your hands, those that have done some sort of Myers-Briggs, or what color are you kind of assessment. So here's the reality, that there are some good assessment tools out there, but again, and we have some tools we use which are a bit more sophisticated, and there's becoming a whole next generation of assessment tools. But there's sort of a sense of I just know my 4-letter acronym, or I'm an extrovert, or I'm an introvert, or this is the way I am, and sort of classifying ourselves in very simplistic models when you and I are much more complex than that. Another myth around this is our family and friends will give us good advice around what our choices are. And again, I think you have to balance your own needs with your family and friends' needs. Another myth around this in general is you should be able to do this on your own. And I think that's never been less true in a sense. Another myth around this is Google. Google has the answer. If I Google what I need, I can get it. And again, there's the myth of that everyone's an expert, right? And you probably see that in the work you do. Another myth around this is you'll find balance. So here's one of my other beliefs around managing your career is you will not find balance. The goal is not necessarily to find balance. The goal is to be integrating in what you do and who you are and managing your career in an integrated way. And that's kind of a different definition of balance. So it's a balance in a different kind of way, but it isn't balance in the typical kind of way where we mean work stops here and, and my home life starts there and things like that. It's much more integrated. Another myth around this is education will help. Now again, what's interesting, you're seeing this today in the Globe and Mail. There's an article about the discussion about the role of education and then the interface of, so again, what kind of education you have, of course it matters, but it doesn't matter as much as the kinds of things we're talking about today. Myth, I don't have time. One of the things I'd recommend you do is what I call the 10-minute rule. It's interesting. If you can apply your own brand and work on your career brand 10 minutes a day, 5 days a week, you're going to have a heck of a lot easier time in your career than if you see it as a static thing. And I think a lot of people see that as a static. They see that I'll kind of work on my career, I'll get certification, and I'll go to work, do my work, and then I'll look for a new job. And it's sort of this bipolar kind of thing. And to me, you want to look at, I was having breakfast with a gentleman this morning, and he started up his own consulting firm 10 years ago, and he's been very, very successful. And one of the things he's done is he gets up to one event a week, and he has 1 or 2, at least minimum of 2 coffees a week with people that he doesn't know or that he reconnects with as a network. What's interesting about LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and these kinds of tools is you can get on there and you can upload and you can connect with people and you can tweet about something, 10 minutes a day, and you'd be amazed what you could learn in 10 minutes a day, how you can raise your visibility in 10 minutes a day, how you can raise your awareness in 10 minutes a day. And this is fundamental. Another myth around this whole thing of having a great HR career is that, I'm going to be lucky. Some people are luckier than others. So to me, I don't really think that's true. But I do think that change is complex and that our ability to deal with change is fundamental. That your ability to manage and deal with change in general is going to be the most important tool you can use to leverage your career. And the constant ability of change. You're going to be reinventing yourself along the way. So I was reading this book recently, and this person was really shocked about a good friend of hers mother, and their mother had said that every 10 years she reinvented herself. And she she looked at her and said, yeah, she has changed herself continually. So my question for you is, as you think about your career and you're at the first phase of your career, are you thinking about your career in cycles? Are you thinking about every 10 years or every 5 years? In fact, I would even argue with you in today's world, it's every 5 years. So you need to be reinventing yourself. You need to be rethinking about where you're at and what you want to do and what projects you're on, and some of the things we talked about a little bit earlier. Another important, really important element to be successful is thinking about your understanding of emotional intelligence at work. This is very interesting, thinking about what are some of the key things about emotional intelligence. The number 1 thing is self-awareness. Then the second thing is self-regulation. The third issue is motivation. The fourth issue is empathy, and the fifth issue is social skills. It's amazing. Even with HR professionals, and I see this, is there sometimes can be not the kind of self-awareness that you would anticipate. And so to me, are you focusing on your strengths and weaknesses? Do you really have a clear sense of that, a very precise sense of that? Same as self-regulation, the ability to be resilient and motivated. Another key attribute to work on. And some of you are stronger in certain areas than others. So one of the questions I have for you today, of these 5 components of emotional intelligence, for you, how would you rank yourself in those areas? How would you rank out of 10 your self-awareness? How would you rank out of 10 your self-regulation? How would you rank out of 10 your motivation? How would you rank out of 10 your empathy? And how would you rank out of 10 your social skills? And giving yourself, and my question to you is, what's your total ranking out of 50? Is it 30 or 40 out of 50? Where's your high and where's your low? And I think that's really important to think about that as it relates to managing your career and thinking about those careers. So what are some of the key things you want to be thinking about as it relates to on an ongoing basis? So the very first principle with managing your career effectively, and it comes back to this idea of social skills, is do you really have a true sense of your uniqueness? Do you really have a sense of this? So here's my thing that I see consistently is, I'll have people come to say to me and they'll say, I'm an HR generalist, or I'm a manager of HR, or I'm a, some sort of generic statement. Now, what's interesting is, I don't know, any of you here based in Ottawa? Just put up your hands if any of you are based in Ottawa. I'm just curious if any of you that are on the webinar today that are from Ottawa, put up your hands. How many of you in Ottawa have seen this taxi? Those that are in Ottawa that have seen its very first taxi. Yeah, it's a few of you. And what's interesting about this is this taxi is a great example of differentiating itself in a commoditized market. So one of the key principles you need to think about as you build your career in HR is, what is the special thing that you have that's unique and that's not this generic scenario? So you're not just an HR professional any more than this person is a taxi driver. They perform a service, but they figure out how to differentiate themselves to create a brand that's unique to them. And I call this the Tim Hortons and Don Cherry principle. And let me give an example of this. So when you think of Tim Hortons, what would be 1 or 2 words that you would use to describe who the brand of Tim Hortons? So not the person. So just in the question box, you put in here from your perspective, how would you describe the brand of Tim Hortons from your perspective? Well, how would you describe Tim Hortons? Comfortable? Absolutely, yep. Comedian, for sure, yep. Consistent? I always say Tim Hortons is consistently average coffee, and food. Consistency, quality. Okay, how would you describe the identity of Starbucks? So describe to me the identity of Starbucks. What's Starbucks' identity? That's quality, yep. What else would you describe Starbucks? Wi-Fi expensive coffee, absolutely. Okay, upscale, yep. I would say that Tim Hortons is the Honda of coffee and Starbucks is the BMW of coffee. Now, what about Don Cherry? How would you describe the unique brand of Don Cherry? Who is Don Cherry from your perspective? Absolutely outspoken, best suits. You feel like that? Yeah, unique suits, no nonsense. Okay. And what about Ron McLean? How would you describe Ron McLean? Sidekick, yeah. A mediator, absolutely. Yeah. Voice of hockey, straight man. Okay, good, excellent. All right, sidekick. Okay. Now, how would you describe the identity of Eaton's? How would you describe Eaton's? How would you describe the identity of Eaton's? Gone, absolutely. See, what's interesting is, at one point, Eaton's far outweighed all of these brands combined. In fact, if you think about it, what is a brand where you can order thousands of items, tens of thousands of items, and they'll deliver to your doorstep? Who is that brand? You can order thousands of items and they'll deliver to your doorstep. It is Amazon, correct. No, it was Eaton's. This picture here is from the 1913 catalog. And in 1913, you could favorite your page. You could look at thousands of items in a catalog, this catalog, and you could order it and it would be delivered to your doorstep. Now, how does this apply to today, to our discussion today about managing a career and building your career? Because what is your brand? What is a thing that you would differentiate yourself, much like this taxi? You know, what is a thing that, you know, if you think about, you know, in these examples, you know, what is Tim Hortons and coffee? Well, it's hot water, and cocoa beans, and milk and sugar. In the media side, it's, you know, it's people that can speak intelligently and are somewhat good looking and have something to say. They're all, in a sense, very much commoditized, or can be commoditized. But what Starbucks, Tim Hortons, Eaton's at one point did, and Don Cherry on their plan, is they have really differentiated themselves in the market. The key principle to understand in your scenario is, what is your brand? And the fact that within microseconds, as I ask you to describe the unique identity of those brands, that you were able to come to the table and articulate that in a very precise way, that is the anchor store into which to build your career. And my experience in coaching and in managing and in the work we do in workshops, and we do these internally, and is very, very few people have a clear and precise understanding of their brand, on the sense of branding. And this idea of branding is a very old idea that's been around. And there's really 4 things that brands have in common. And if you're going to have a great career, these are the 4 principles you're going to need to work on. Do you know who you are clearly? Do you know who and where you market specifically? Do you market yourself confidently, consistently? And do you evolve and adapt on a continual basis? So Eaton's did that at the very beginning, and then it stopped evolving. It got stuck somewhere, and eventually it went away. And that's what happens with all brands. It also happens with all HR professionals, financial professionals, whatever. When you get stuck, eventually you'll become obsolete. So do you know who you are clearly? Do you know who and where your market is specifically? See, what's interesting about Don Cherry and Ron McLean, they have different markets. Tim Hortons and Starbucks, they have different markets. They're not going after all the same market. You know, in your case, maybe it's small to medium-sized companies. Maybe it's consulting. Maybe it's international. Maybe it's healthcare. Maybe, you know, there's an area where you specialize. And it's really important to figure that area out. And you can't be an HR professional for everything. Do you market yourself confidently, consistently? See, this is something that I see is problematic. Now, how many of you have heard or have shared this concept of you've got to learn how to sell yourself? Put up your hands if you've said that in a meeting to somebody or you've heard it. So here's the reality. That is not true. It is not true. How many of you like being sold to? Put up your hands, those of you that like to be sold to, that you like somebody selling you. Do you like that? Put up your hands, those of you that like to buy, that enjoy the buying. You don't like being sold, but you love buying. See, it's not about selling yourself. That's the biggest mistake that professionals make in their career. It's about understanding who you are and how to market yourself, how to position yourself properly, how to build your brand so that opportunity will flow to you in a very authentic way. See, we don't like being sold. I don't like it. You don't like it. But we do like to buy. We do like to find situations that will solve problems for us that we feel are authentically there to support us. And this is where tools like LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and your network and marketing yourself and having visibility, both internally and externally, is such an important element to managing your career. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but there's a tool we have on our site that you can download to help you think about your identity in a more precise way. And you can download it on our site, and it's called the Career Identity Tool. It's on the front page of our site. It's called the 15-minute career test here, and you'll see that there. And it's in there. You can download that. But that's the tool if you're thinking about, or you're having others that are struggling with, what is it that I do well? What is my unique ability? What is my special sauce? And again, what's interesting is it's generally the fundamentals. It's in this minor element. So do you have a clear sense of knowing who you are clearly? Do you know who and where your market is? Do you market yourself clearly? And do you evolve? What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to pick the one area of these 4 that you're strongest in and the one area of these 4 that you're weakest in. So think about it. What's your strongest of these 4 and what's your weakest of these 4? And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to continually focus on your strength, the strongest one. I want to keep, and that 10-minute a day principle, I'd like you to spend 5 minutes a day on your strength and 5 minutes a day on your weakness. So with your weaknesses, not marketing yourself consistently, if that's the thing you can do, then maybe spend 5 minutes a day upgrading, uploading to LinkedIn or sending a tweet out or working on that whole idea. So how do you go about, building upon these 4 principles? What are some of the things to think about as you think about knowing yourself, marketing yourself, building yourself? Well, number one is you got to do your work well. It's very interesting thinking about this, that, the number 1 principle, of course, is even in that taxi idea. I don't, while I'm attracted to the fact that it's a unique taxi and it stands out from the crowd, the reality is I want it to get it from point A to point B. I want it to show up in front of my door, and I want it to take me where I want to go. And so the principle of this idea of keeping calm and knitting on is you've got to do, you got to stick to your knitting, as they say. So my question for you is, are you doing what you're doing now really, really well? Another element of this is, we've all heard the term "fake it till you make it." So that we've all heard that, right? It's a term I've said. I'm sure you've said, you've heard it. And to me, no, it's be it until you make it. And being it means knitting. It means doing what you need to do, not getting all uptight with all the change that are going on in your organization around the things we don't have control over, but just doing what you need to do. Another really important principle, and this is how many of you have seen or read the postsecret.com blog? How many of you read that blog or watch? I read it weekly. It's the world's #1 free blog, or the highest traffic blog in the world. They call it a public confessional. It used to be when you went to tell the priest. Now you go tell Post Secret. It's a very, if you have a chance today and you want to check it out, it's very interesting. Anyways, I saw the secret on Post Secret, and I saw it says, I've compromised almost every major decision in my life because of other people. Well, guess what? This one's for me. Another big mistake I find with most people is that they're making decisions on all other people in their lives, or on organizations, or on their boss, or whatever. Now, again, sort of in conflict to my earlier thing, which is paying attention to the organization needs. So how do you do that? How do you hold those in tension of paying attention to what the organization needs, or what are the other demands of my life? But the ultimate thing to have a sustaining career is you have to serve your own needs. You have to be able to figure out what your needs are, and those needs can be this. What do you love? What do you do well? What does the world pay for, and what the world needs, right? And that fine spot in there of it's bliss, which to me is a term that I don't feel totally comfortable with, but this idea of where's that spot in the middle there that incorporates your vocation, your passion, your share, the thing that you do really, really well, and you serve your needs. See, I think we have in work needs. There's needs and wants, and we all have needs, and our needs are very common to all of us. I need to go to work, and I hear this needs consistently from people. I want to go do interesting work. I want to do it in a healthy environment. I want to be paid decently for it, and I want to grow as a person. And this comes back to, don't do something long-term if it doesn't serve your own needs. It's not good for you specifically. It goes back to all those mental health issues. I think the number of reasons most mental health issues happen in the workplace is because people are in the wrong job fit, or they're doing it for the wrong reason. And you will not have any measure of success long-term as an HR professional if you're not serving your own needs. And you don't want to be in the bottom 80% of your profession. You're going to have real problems. And the only way to about 20% is to do things well. So another principle is defining an environment you can be that is like home, in a way that it's you can nurture yourself, you can grow, you can find a place that is the environment. So again, environment. I've seen HR professionals, again, they're really talented, but they're in the wrong environment, and then environment is stifling them. And again, you spend way more time. By the way, your home really is your office in the sense of where you're the most awake, right? So again, another principle in career management is finding an environment, finding the right kind of environment that you can thrive in, and think that. You have to think of yourself like a product. It's another key principle in managing your career. What's your product? What's your uniqueness? What's your brand? You have to think about this concept of, do you pay attention to what's going on globally, and are you applying it locally? So what do I mean by that? Are you paying attention to your organization? Are you looking for global assignments? Are you paying attention to maybe not even global assignments, the idea that other divisions in the organization. You know, it's very interesting. Brian Ivy is a name, a guy that I know. Now, Brian Ivy, that name may mean nothing to you, but here's why it's an important name. Because there, at one point in Nortel, there was over 1,000 people in HR. The very last HR recruiter left standing in Nortel was Brian Ivy. Now, why did Brian Ivy survive, going from, you know, number 1,050 HR professional down to 1? Because he practiced this idea of, he paid attention to the organization, he paid attention to where needs were, he paid attention on his network, he paid attention to where the growth opportunities were, and he worked at that. Another key thing is what I call the plus. So talent plus education plus. This picture, by the way, is from, I read a blog, Barry Ritholtz, who is runs a financial blog. And this is the picture of his EA. And his EA on weekends races cars. And every single person that he's hired in his team does something unique or is involved in something unique. And this is just one example of this. So what does that matter? Because you're an HR professional plus your experience plus your education. And what's the other plus in your life? What are you doing in your life that is volunteering or stretching yourself, or is it parasailing? Is it skydiving? Is it shooting? I don't know what it is, but one of the things I think is going to be really important as we move from a world where A was, what I call moving from the A world to you're going to have to be A plus. If you're going to do really, really well in HR long term, it's not going to be good enough to be an A HR person. You're going to have to be an A plus person. And what is going to be a plus for you that's going to help you see the world differently or help you experience things in a different way? That's another really important principle. What's your plus to move you from an A to an A plus is going to, again, a differentiator. Whatever life experiences, whatever interests you have that are not work related. So they're not, I'm taking another HR course or whatever. Everyone's doing that. What is something you can do that will help you to see the world, build your network, grow yourself? And the interesting thing about those other plus things in our life, those are the things we often grow and build a lot of confidence. And I can think of this last couple of years for me. I have learned how to kayak. I got a kayak last year. 3 years ago, I learned how to snowboard. I'd never snowboarded before. This year, I'm learning French and piano. And I just ordered a paddleboard, right? So these kinds of things, that having experiences in my life that help me to grow as a person, enable me to be a better professional. Speaking of growth, it's thinking about, sort of the ABCs, the fundamentals as well. What are you working on the fundamentals? So on one hand, it's the plus. The other things are what are you working on the core fundamentals of what you're doing? Because all of us have ABCs in what we do. So that's another thing to grow continually. Another element to think about is what I call the 3D factor. What do I mean by that? You want to think about yourself three-dimensionally. So you want to move from this two-dimensional idea of just having a brand that's online with your resume and thinking about how to leverage LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, all these other tools that are out there. And again, you need to raise your literacy around them. Again, 100% of you should have a Twitter account. 100% of you should be very active on LinkedIn in an appropriate way. Are you doing that? And again, James Cameron understood that. James Cameron understood that telling his story and using technology to tell that story enabled his story to spread and have more visibility and more interest. It was more interesting, right? So again, thinking about those tools, are you doing that? Another principle in managing a career as an HR professional is pay attention to the obvious opportunities that are often not very obvious. So what do I mean by that? When I was in Shoppers Drug Mart, getting some toothpaste, and I walked by the Quantum Mile, and here's an ad for pregnancy tests. It's very obvious, right? You think, well, of course, doesn't that make sense? So again, are you paying attention to creating opportunities? So again, another principle for people to do really well in anything today is, are you creating or waiting? And the people that are going to do really well in career management are going to be creating, not waiting. They're going to be looking for opportunities. Another important principle is what I call the dog principle. This is my niece, and she had spent the day in the water, and her dog had also spent the day in the water. And what do you think she's feeding her dog right now? What is she offering to her dog? What do you think is in her hand? What's in her book? What do you think is in her hand? Well, water, exactly. How do you know it's water? Because the dog's not interested in it. The dog has just spent the whole day in water. Now, if she had offered the dog food, how interested would Lily be in dog food? So again, for you, the question is, thinking about what is it that you're going to do to offer the market something the market wants. Somebody's asking questions, I'm going to come back to you, Janet. How do I find my first aid job? It's been 4 years since I graduated with an HR manager, so I can't find an entry level. Because probably, Janet, you're probably offering the market what it's not that interested in. So my question, and I'm going to come back more specifically to an answer on that, is what is it you're going to offer the market that it wants? And that's whether you're trying to get your first job, whether you're trying to become a manager, whether you're trying to get attention in the organization. Are you paying attention to the organization's needs? Are you feeding it what everyone else feeds it or what you expect it to feed it? So this becomes, are you prepared? How many of you were Scouts or Cubs? And we're going to open this up for more specific questions, by the way, in a few minutes, so just FYI. How many of you put up your hands for Scouts or Brownie growing up, or in the Brownie era? And see, one of the things that I learned from that, in fact, one of our corporate clients, is this concept of being prepared. Being prepared. So another principle is, are you getting prepared for what's next? See, often people are asking me what's next, and I say, what do you mean by that question? They're like, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do I mean by that question? And I would say it's not what's next, it's what's next. Are you thinking about where you're heading, and are you prepared for that and growing yourself in that sort of way? Another principle is connection. This comes back to Janet's question about how do I get my first job. 80% of opportunities are going to come through networks. They're not going to come through Workopolis or Monster. I mean, those elements are important, but the reality is if you're going to be applying, you're going to be chasing, just like this dog. You're going to be like Lily. It's going to have 100 hands around it, all offering water, and it doesn't care, right? So what does your network look like? It's just mentioning that, I said at breakfast this morning, this gentleman that, every week he's getting out to 2 events and meeting coffees or getting into an event and getting coffees with people, connecting, raising his connection rate, really, really key. Optimism is another element to protect, as far as opportunity and, are you optimistic? Now, again, balancing that with, are you opportunistic? And I think there's the balance between opportunistic and what do I mean by that? This is what I mean by that. That there's optimism, so it says, well, I'm a pessimist and realist. It says, while you guys are busy arguing about the glass of water, I drank it. So again, are you opportunistic in the ways that you're networking? Just talking about that networking, the neat thing about the HR professionals, you guys have all kinds of events. They're constantly providing events. How many events have you been to recently? How many HR events are you getting to? And again, the other thing I would suggest is don't just go to HR events. This is my point about earlier about having other pluses in your life, whether it's faith community or volunteer community or whatever it might be. One of our clients just got a position out west. How do you get that position? Because he got very actively involved in a political campaign, became part of the network, and as a result of that, had a really good opportunity. So it could be in politics, faith, volunteering, sports clubs. There's all kinds of ways to be networked and getting out and meeting people. Come back to this idea of Scouts and Cubs, and just to kind of revisit, it's one of the everything sharing, do your best, and be prepared, 3 models. I saw this when I was getting groceries earlier in the fall this year. That's such a key. If you do those things, if you share, so another important thing in networking is a lot of people see networking is about them. And when I think networking is about sharing, so example, after I met this gentleman this morning for coffee, or for breakfast rather, I sent him off a little email about, topic we covered, and I thought a blog he might be interested, right? So again, in networking, are you sharing to your network what your network wants? Are you helping it achieve what it wants, and elements around that? Another important element is in work is knowing when's enough and not enough. I think that's one of the key challenges in HR, particularly where you're under all kinds of demands. There's all kinds of needs out there. You're people asking for all kinds of help in different ways, and knowing where to find boundaries, digital boundaries and personal boundaries. And what's interesting is you're in a service-based environment, and sometimes people have unrealistic expectations of what you can provide and what we should provide, and the timing of that. And you don't have an easy job. It's not like finance where everything is sort of put in a box and you can wrap it and give it in the bow, right? A lot of the things, whether it's in a recruiting perspective or an HR policy issue or a realignment issue, takes time, and it's not black and white. So that's a key thing in that. So my question for you is, are you coming soon maybe on some of these things as you think about managing and building your career. Are you coming, and thinking about these ideas, coming soon maybe. So as we think about sort of launching your career and thinking about your career and some of the principles we're talking about today, what is one takeaway from today that you would like to implement? So what is one idea from today? And I want to get you to share that with me just because I'm curious about some of the ideas. What is one idea from today that you would like to implement as you think about managing your career and getting your scenario going? In a sense, whether it's getting started or whether you're at the early part of your career, because most of you are either trying to get started or at the early part of your career, what is the things that you're going to start working on to implement? Because again, at some point coming in this webinar, if you're not going to do something with this, it will not help you. And quite frankly, it's in my end, it's frustrating, right? Because I want to see people grow, and I think that. So what are some of the ideas? And we're going to open this up for Q&A, and I'm going to respond to some of the questions that have been coming in. So Natalie talked about the 10-minute rule. Okay, good. Danielle talked about this idea of getting more pluses. Yeah, I've been thinking about that. Writing a blog about that, by the way. It's sort of my thought of this week of moving from an A to an A+, and and that's really key. Lake talked about this idea of increasing visibility. Yeah. Julia, the 10 minutes per day. Yeah. Nancy, again, the 10 minutes per day. So grow and market brand. And also the thing I'd be in, we live in a world I call the drive-through world, right? We're all looking for drive-through answers. And, we go, and even Starbucks has drive-through now, right? It's almost like, the Ritz Hotel with drive-through, just something about it doesn't seem right. But anyways, this idea that you have to what I call precision. And that 10 minutes, if you consistently work at it, it's like weight loss. It's a lot easier than an hour at it. Shuita talked about the idea of figuring out my brand. Okay, good. Then she talked about this idea of 10 minutes a day, which is great, working on your strengths and weaknesses, being active. Danielle on LinkedIn, the 10-minute strength, again, Charlene. Agnes talked about reassessing my career every 5 years. Yeah, you really want to rethink. The other thing I would say about reinvent, because we often think of, and I used to think of reinvent, meant to go and do something different. And if you look at the means, if you think restart, redo, rethink, it means to go back. The part, the etymology of the word and the inventus means to discover or come upon. So one of the things about, why I think that that Google has done so well and Apple's done so well is because they continually are reinventing themselves. You think of Google Glasses, Google Cars, they've got something else they're doing, and you think of RIM. And RIM did not reinvent itself quickly, and that's sort of a metaphor for the world. That you could go from, being a lead or even the creator of the category, as RIM was, to 5 years later being fourth or fifth, and most likely they're not going to be a standalone company. They'll be part of something major enterprise, right? So that's good. So you want to be thinking of reinvent. Means doesn't necessarily mean going to do something different. It means going back to your core elements, looking at what's driving you, but how to reapply that in the market and paying attention to the market. Lena talked about networking more. Yeah, and think about that. The other thing I would say is the one challenge of networking is, and people say that I'm an introvert. So the interesting thing about being an introvert is that's where technology is beautiful, because you can blog, you can tweet, you can do LinkedIn, and you don't have to actually, put yourself in an uncomfortable situation as you were personally. And you can use those things to prepare for opportunities. But on the other hand, my caution with you is that I think some people are spending not enough time. So what the danger is, and I've actually saw that in myself, where I become so digitally centered that I actually wasn't spending enough time in what I call analog experiences, which is me getting out to networking events and alumni events and things like this. And so I wasn't spending enough time in that. So I had to reorient myself so that I was able to balance more, and that's something I would do that. Cheryl talked about knowing what your A+ is and what the difference is. Janet talks about focusing more on branding. Joanne talks about this idea of creating my brand was important on this. So here's a comment I would say, Joanne, you have a brand. You have a brand now. It's being intentional about that brand. That would be my advice. It's understanding it. We all have brands, but I think one, being intentional about it, and then managing it. And that is so fundamental because of all those other changes before, because you do not work for companies, you work for yourself. You may be employed by a company currently right now, but you are trading on this independent thing. You're seeing this, so not a movement. As I said to you, that 40% will probably more likely be 60 or 70% over the next 10 years. But more likely, 60 to 70% of the top HR professional in organizations will come from outside the organization, will not come from inside. Right? Rosemary talked about how to be more 3D. Yeah, really think about this concept. So again, James Cameron really got that. It was a very simple movie, but he used technology to tell that story and make it more interesting in 3D. Lisa talked about this idea of today's takeaway: don't sell myself, market myself. Get others to buy into you. Yeah, it's so much. It was, Lisa, that idea came to me maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and it has profoundly changed the way I view everything in my life. But I realized I'd kind of been doing it instinctively, but it's taken the pressure off. It's a lot more pleasant. It's I don't have to force it. It's authentic. So many benefits to moving my head from a metaphor from selling to marketing myself. I heard a great line this weekend from actually a Roman Catholic priest who's started an organization. Well, it's 25 years old, called Homeboys, and they're doing amazing work in Los Angeles. And he talked about if you change the metaphor, you can change your life, and that's the thing. Danielle talked about finding out a coach to figure out who I am. Hey, guess what? I'll put a plug. This is what we do. So if you are looking for a coach or looking for support, or your organization is looking for some of this workshop stuff to come in, this is the kind of work that we do, both organizational side and individual side. We work coast to coast with clients, one-on-one. We have 3 offices in Toronto, and Ottawa, Kingston, Montreal, Halifax, Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary. So we work that. So I will put a bit of a plug in there. Another person can talk about working on my brand and how to market this with my organization. Yeah. So that's another principle I didn't talk a whole lot of today. You want to be thinking about your internal brand and your external brand. You want to make sure they're in alignment, but you want to work on both. A great way to do that, by the way, we just did some work with the RCMP in Ottawa, and one of the people that came to one of our workshops, so we do workshops where organizations bring us in to talk about these concepts internally to help their team to think about how to self-manage their brand and not self-manage their career. And one of the people talked to me there about that, and she shared her experience to a group about how she got involved with leading the United Way campaign for her division. And as a result of that, when the RCMP was going through changes, she ended up having a much broader network than her peers did. And as a result of that, was able to navigate through transition and much more effectively than some of her peers. And so that's an example of the plus. And it was also a great way to get more actively involved. And again, within organizations, there's all kinds of clubs, right? So I will kind of put out a plug for what we do, and just a reminder, if you haven't connected with LinkedIn, I'll send that to you. Speaking of being more connected, that I'll send it all to you, is feel free to send me a link. If you are looking for support, one-on-one support, or you're looking for organizations looking to do restructuring, outplacement, some of the, you might be going through transitions. We do leadership development, career development, transitional development, all those kinds of things. We'd be happy to talk to you about that and reach out to you about that. So I'm going to open this up for specific questions about today, and a couple of quick things. If you if you're looking for individual stuff, then feel free to reach out to us. We can set up a 45-minute initial session with one of our coaches to talk to you about your situation wherever you are, as well as if you want organizational stuff, then feel free to reach out to me directly, and we can talk to you about how to help your organization. One of the things I think that differentiates us, and I'm proud of this, is that we see about it's not a commoditized, webinar only based environment that we provide. I mean, we're providing webinars because this is this format for today, but all of our work is one-on-one, and it's not this functional, commoditized, homogenized approach. One of the things I'm most proud about is really we take a human approach, the human approach to career development, right? And this is really fundamental to what I believe in the human approach to career development. So the question that came is, so I'll come back to an earlier question that was asked, was getting my, I'm an introvert, and I'm starting to, I'm trying to get my career going. And that, somebody asked, Jed asked that question. I'm trying to get my first HR job. It's been 4 years. So the question, I think you want to be thinking about, Janet, is you're going to have to do the thing as an introvert that you share, that you're an introvert. You're going to have to meet people. And the other thing is, the reality is, my question for you, if you're in HR and you are a painful, and you self-define yourself as a painful introvert, how's that going to work? Because fundamentally, that function is all people related. It's kind of like saying I'm an introvert, but I'm going to be a teacher. We had that with one of our clients, by the way. He was a very strong introvert, and was burning out of teaching, of course, because he's in an environment where he's with people all day long. It was unsustainable. So you're either going to have to rethink about how you self-define. And by the way, introvert doesn't mean you don't like people. It just means you have to be careful about the amount of time you spend with people, or find ways to be creative. This is to my point about your 3D, Janet, about this idea of what are you doing, to build your online brand, and some of those things about your networks and connect with your community. Also, what are some areas where you're comfortable? See, introverts, and I'm an introvert, by the way, so I know how to speak of. As an introvert, you want to be thinking about, there's all kinds of ways to being involved and volunteering. The other thing I would suggest is, are you volunteering at all? Because volunteering can be a great way to get involved in organizations, and often organizations thinking about this. You want to be thinking about online, you want to be thinking about faith communities, you want to be thinking about social communities, and quite frankly, you're going to have to shift it up. You're going to have to take some risk. You're going to have to put yourself in some measure of discomfort to move this forward. Or you have to rethink, are you on the right career path? And really say, is HR, which is all about people, and it's all about being in front of people on an ongoing basis, is that the right career for you? And again, I've seen that. I've seen people who clearly should have been in an area that was more finance-oriented, or something that was more dealing with ideas. Or again, if it's in HR, you can do HR, but you have to think about a specialization in HR, which is maybe more data analyst or about some elements around that. So that would be my advice to you. Charmaine asked the question is, I'm 56 years old, and my career is in ops management in the aviation industry. I recently hooked up with a company, and they wanted an HR business partner. I don't have any formal training in HR designation, and felt this was way above my head, yet they wanted someone to hit the ground running. I politely declined. I didn't want to fall at something where they obviously needed a seasoned professional. Was I wrong? Well, I don't know if you're wrong or not, so I can't answer that. What I can say is sometimes opportunity comes our way. And so I talked about earlier about being prepared. And sometimes there's the intention with that, Charmaine, is this concept of being opportunistic. So sometimes, I guess, my advice is maybe, is there a way to balance those things? So sometimes, we're never quite prepared for opportunity. I was just listening to a description this morning of a gentleman who scored his first NHL goal last night, who used to play for the Ottawa 67s. Now, was he prepared for that? Well, in some ways he was. He had the formal change, but in some ways, I'm sure if we talked to him before the game, he was incredibly nervous, right? So sometimes putting ourselves in situations where we can learn on the fly, and sometimes opportunity comes our way that it makes us nervous. So my rule of thumb like that is, being nervous is different than being scared like hell, if you want to use that word. If you truly think that you're going to, it's way above your head, it truly is that. That's the question. Is it truly above your head, or is it more that you're just anxious about it? And the other thing about it is, how much did this firm know about your background and who you were, what you did and did not bring to the table? In some ways you could go to them and say, another way you could approach this is try a contract. Say, yeah, I'd love to work with you guys. Can we start on a contract basis and work for 3 months and kind of see how it works and start me on projects and make sure you're comfortable and I'm comfortable. So you don't have to sort of see it as either yes or no. There's a third way called let's do some projects and pilot it that way. I love the concept of pilot, speaking of aviation, where you came from. So my often say, if you're not sure, then sometimes I recommend pilot. So again, if you said to me, they wanted me to do some surgery, and I'm not trained as a surgeon, that's slightly different, right? We're not going to let people pilot at being a surgeon, right? So, but I do think, sometimes if you're not sure, but you're not quite sure, if it's just you're nervous or what your own resistance to change, and we've all been there, and we all know what I speak when I say that, or is it truly that, you're truly, it's going to be a bad fit? So one way to avoid that, or one way to think about that, or maybe even to go back to them and say, can you do some projects? Can we, and knowing what they know. Lean asked the question, you have advice on how to get people to buy into you instead of selling yourself? So my number one advice is listen. You know, Lena, too many people talk. There's a great line, telling is not selling. And so using that metaphor, because we said we're not selling, this idea of listening it's about listening, not about telling. So to me, it's getting out and meeting people, figuring out what their needs are. Again, that dog food principle. Listening to what their needs are and then trying to understand how potentially you could help them. See, when people hear you and you ask the question, how can I help you? You know, that's a very powerful question. What can I do to help you? It's not about you telling me how you're going to help me or what I need from you, which is selling. It's listening and asking questions. And this is where informational meetings, getting out to coffees with people, finding out what needs are. And you know what? We just hired somebody that we've been looking for like 2 years. We've had a need to find this person. And I just had to find the right person, right? So, and she had great experience. You know, one of the things we were all impressed with when we interviewed Susan was she just asked tremendously thoughtful questions. She didn't sell us at all, really. That's what we were impressed with. She just asked some great questions about us. And that made us want to buy her. So that would be my biggest advice. Like I asked this question, my work experience is unrelated to HR field, and a particular challenge for me is demonstrating my resume that my work experience is relevant to jobs I'm applying for. It seems even entry-level HR jobs require experience, and I'm looking for more information on how to expand educational and highlight section of my resume to make up for my lacking. Okay, so like number one, resumes don't get people jobs. That's the dirty secret. You will not get a role probably sending your resume up. What you will get a role with is, particularly when you're trying to transition into something, is you're going to have to, it's called the N-word, right? You're going to have to meet more people in areas and be able to tell your story to them and get them to understand what you have to offer and what their needs are, and start the conversation that way. Because on paper, it's going to be a tough sell, particularly in what I call public roles, where everyone knows about them. So in their entry levels, they're going to have 200, 300 resumes coming probably. So to me, my advice to you is you need to network into opportunities where they're not going to go public. You know what? It's a pain in the butt to hire. It really is. That's the other dirty secret. Most people can't stand the hiring process. They want to get people in the seat, but really the process of finding somebody, the right person, it's a pain in the butt. That's for most people. It's been for us. So we're currently, for example, looking for a couple of executive coaches, and one in Ottawa who's bilingual and certified, and one in Toronto who's certified. Now again, it's another thing that I have to do on top of what I'm already doing. So if somebody could show up to me and offer this to me, we've hired a number of people who reached out to me directly, who just introduced themselves and started the conversation. And I've hired half of our team that way, that I didn't have on our site. We were looking for somebody, but they reached out to me. We just hired somebody in Montreal that way. We hired somebody in Vancouver that way. So that would be my. Now on your training side, there are certainly, HR Association has a number of different programs you might want to take, because you are going to be certified. Again, it's not the idea. You're going to have to be certified. So I'm not dishing certification, but I am dishing resume. That especially when you're trying to crack the market, the resume is not going to get you a job. You need to have a resume. Don't get me wrong. That's the reality. But the dirty secret is that that resume standalone will most likely not going to get you a door open, independent, without those other things I talked about earlier, the plus things. Janet says, I'm great one-on-one. And I agree. Listen, I understand what you're saying, Janet, earlier. She was a generalist validity asking about the interview thing. I think it's just you have to think about how to get more one-on-one opportunities. So that would be my advice, is maybe using social media, blogging, other things, to figure out how to get more one-on-one meetings. And that's really where, people hire one-on-one. That's the other interesting thing, Janet, is they don't hire in groups. So, but how do you get to one-on-one is sort of the trick. Carol asked the question, will you be sending out recorded? Yes, we will be sending out recorded. We're recording it. So, Prithvi asked the question. I've met a lot of professionals from big companies, they have said I'm presentable, personable, and confident, and my resume looks good. However, I haven't been getting interview calls in spite of applying like crazy. And I've been volunteering for the past 6 months, no job still. So my advice to you is, you're going to have to keep doing what you're doing. And maybe, by the way, not go to giant companies. So one of the scenarios is you're going after giant companies. Guess what? 70% of the employment market is in the small to medium-sized enterprise. They're not in giant companies. In fact, giant companies are, not growing at the same rate. The biggest growth part of our economy is not in giant companies. It's in the small and medium-sized enterprise. So my advice to you would be spend more time, pursuing small and medium-sized companies. Spend less time. I'm not saying no time, but spend less time on the big companies and spend more time on small to medium-sized enterprise, because generally smaller companies are more flexible. There's more activity happening in small companies, and there's more opportunities as a percentage of what's going on. And that's how most people get their start. So some people get, they'll get out of the gate, they'll get an opportunity at Google's of the world or whatever, the Microsofts of the world or the World Banks of the world. But a lot of people, end up in those scenarios by starting in small companies. Again, the gentleman I mentioned who was the last guy standing at Nortel, got his start in this small little boutique recruiting startup with 2 people in it. And that's how he got started in recruiting. That's how he got going, was there. Right? So then you asked the question, I chose to move every 2 to 3 years. How do you stay motivated when you always feel like you're not proficient, just spending short periods of time doing different terms in organizations? That's a challenge. I think it's sort of the way the world is going, that you have to be prepared for more transition. And for some people, that's harder than others. So either the one advice might be then is look for larger companies where you can work on projects. So they might be going project to project, but it's in a larger company. So you're not sort of starting all over again with the sector or the environment that you've got already that sort of down pat, you understand it. Maybe looking for that might be helpful, looking for Another question, is LinkedIn and Facebook the only media from where you can network being a new immigrant? Well, Veronica, I mean, it's LinkedIn is online the LinkedIn and Facebook are the most important. But being a new immigrant, the interesting thing is that my advice to you is go to your community. Each immigrant community. So, example, I spoke at a recent event for Indian entrepreneurs. I've spoken at Chinese entrepreneurs. I've spoken at so look, whatever community you're from, go to that network. Most of them have events on a continual basis. Get out to them. Meet people in your community, and they often will be the most open, by the way, to getting out there. So another question, it's been 2 weeks after second interview. Does this mean I might not be hired? Good question, Judy. It may mean you may not be hired. I don't know what kind of follow-up you have, and we didn't talk about that today, but one of the things you want to be thinking about is creative and interesting follow-up. Most people don't do a very good job. I think the follow-up is very poor. It's thank you for the meeting, next. And one of the things you want to be thinking about in general is in the follow-up is, are you adding more value to that conversation? So essentially keep the conversation going. It may or may not mean that they're hiring. Sometimes, and I've seen this where organizations haven't made a decision at all. Don't necessarily assume that. They just haven't had an opportunity. And again, even if you think of the last 2 weeks, example, last week, I was on March break myself, right? So many people in HR might have been away for a week and then you're back a week. So don't assume that they haven't hired yet. Jesse asked the question, I worked on contract HR-related jobs for about 3 years now. I can never land in a full-time HR role. I believe I have experience working on the certification and finding it very challenging. Yeah, it's part of the reality I said earlier of the way the world's changing. The other question is maybe change your definition of full-time. I know what you mean, though. I know that you'd like to be in a situation where it's a longer contract. But I think, the world is moving to what I call, if you're an actor, and I said to you in the last 3 years you've worked on 3 movies and it kept you fairly busy. If you're an actor, if I was an actor, how successful of an actor would you say I was? Well, you'd say I'd be a very successful actor. You say, the last 3 years you've worked on 3 movies, it's kept you busy most of the time. And again, it's our perception, our metaphor, that contract to contract. I think you're going to have to keep doing what you're doing until you get a break, until you see something that maybe is a longer-term employment situation. Great. Great questions today, by the way. Aretha, any thoughts on how to successfully switch from a long career in a not-for-profit to corporate? It's funny because I see the opposite, where people saying, I get questions about to move from corporate to not-for-profit. You know, again, you know, one of the things that I found is that the most successful way to do that is you're going to have to get out and meet with people that are in the corporate world and get connected that way. You know, that's how people move sectors. You know, it's a lot more challenging to move sectors. You know, recruiters are not necessarily going to be that actively involved with helping move sectors. You know, that's the reality. You know, they're paid to sort of move people within sectors, not out of sectors. So my advice to you would be, who do you know in your community? Who do you know that you know? And getting on and meeting lots of people. And again, talk not so much about not-profit, but talk about the problems, budgets, people themselves. See, not-for-profit, for-profit, NGOs, government, they're all the same. Perceptions are different, but they all have budgets. They all have people working there. They all have problems to solve. They all have to raise money, or So the interesting thing is they're not as different as people perceive. So, but sometimes their perception is that they're quite different, when in fact they're not as different. But you have to, again, be able to tell that story in an interesting way. So again, the way to tell that story is one-on-one with people. It's a very difficult story to tell just on paper in general. A couple quick things. If you are finding today helpful, one of the things I would ask is, you know, we have a number of tools on our site that are free. We have a number of webinars that are free on our site. You know, you can draw from, you know, there's tons of data there, tons of blogs. Connect with me on LinkedIn and Facebook. If you know people are looking for support or you're looking for, then feel free to connect with me. Brad asked a question, I want to offer my time and skills to volunteer, but how do I reach the right people and organizations for volunteering? I applied for volunteering to the YMCA, but I've not heard from them. Do I need to reach out to people to volunteer? Yeah, you do. You know, Veronica, you have to market yourself. You're going to have to, again, and I would look out more than the YMCA. So, again, this is the challenge. It's like saying, I want to get, you know, if I said to you, I want to start my HR career in a large company, what would be a company you think of right away? Probably Google, right? So Google gets this high flow of people every year applying to it. Same thing with, I want to volunteer. Who's the #1 thing most people think about? United Way or YMCA. Look for maybe small to medium-sized organizations. There's all kinds of them there. Look up. I don't know if you're familiar with Charity Village. CharityVillage.com or .ca has all kinds of resources on there of organizations that are looking. So take a look at that. And go to small to medium-sized enterprises. Don't ignore the big ones, but spend more time out. Great. All right. So I think we'll wrap up on that. I recognize we've kind of gone on over the a lot of great questions today, so thank you for that. This webinar has been recorded, and if you know of people who want to come to tonight's webinar, let your network know. We're doing this tonight at, or if you want to double dip, from 8 till 9. We're doing this again, so if you know people in your network, if you just want to tweet it or let people know on LinkedIn, if you found this valuable and helpful, then I'm sure your network as well. You think about that 5 to 10 minutes a day, let others know. Share, right? That's one of the key principles to your network is share. Give them value, and they'll be more willing to share more with you. So terrific. All right. Well, hope you're all doing well, and it's sort of the last, seemingly our last kick at winter here. Hoping, again, if we can help you, our firm can help you, then reach out to our team. We'd be happy to talk about how our services can help you or your organization as you go about here. So have a terrific day, everyone. Thanks again.